Off you go.
Thank you so much, Imran, for having me on. And it's an honest, and genuine pleasure to be with all of you today. For those that are Muslims, Assalamu alaikum. For those that are looking into it, may God be with you. May peace be with you. May happiness be with you. And may all goodness and well being from all different aspects, mind, body, and soul, be with you all. I hope you're all doing absolutely amazing. For those of you that are fasting, I hope it's going well. For those of you that aren't fasting, I hope you're snacking and enjoying all the snacks behind the screen. Please do not let me hear any crisp noise or any chewing noises, please, because I'm actually fasting today. Thank you so much. Thank you, man. Jazakallah for having me on. It's an honest pleasure. It's a gift for me to be able to speak about. I don't want to even call it my work. I want to call it the work of great thinkers, people from the Islamic approach, people from the non-Islamic approach, the secular approach, and why emotions, right? And I think ultimately one thing that's very beautiful that is an amazing plain leveling field for us, or even to understand us as human beings beyond religion, beyond creed, beyond understanding of cultures and colors and so on. I think is emotions, right? To feel emotions means one is human, right? For one to be human, we must also feel emotions. I think it wasn't really touched upon when I was growing up. Me, I'm actually from the West, quote unquote West. I'm actually from Leicester. Um, if anyone's from Leicester, big up, big blessings. If any of you aren't, still blessings always. I think one thing that was always very important to me growing up was the whole element of how do I stay happy? How do I understand my life? What is my purpose, right? And I never wanted to take it from just one approach. I think that's very dangerous. It does a great injustice to a human beings like myself that has the ability to think, that has the ability to question things, the ability to have logic, but also the ability to understand like what it is that I want for my own life, right? If I listen to my parents, then I become a product of their own understanding. If I listen to my religion only, I become a product of that understanding specifically. But if I listen to myself, like what is my product? Who am I as a person? What does it mean to be Khalil? So that's kind of what we wanted to explore. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of understand, or I wanted to understand what was super important for me. And I think what's awesome about bringing all of it together is you realize that you literally can understand things from so many different perspectives, because it's not about what you understand, it's how you come to something to understand it, because we are human first beyond everything else, right? It's one of those things. From the Islamic perspective, let's say yes, you're born a Muslim, just ultimately believing that there is just one creator, or just the concept of a creator, not just a specific god or the name of a god, because it's not really important the titles that you give to it, rather the meaning that you get from certain titles. So without any further ado, I guess we'll get started. Um, Something that's quite interesting that Plato obviously spoke about. He says human behavior flows from three main sources, right? So there's desires, there's emotions, and there's knowledge. So we all have three, no matter what it is. And I think one thing that I've always liked to take massive pride in my own work was always about it's not about one specific area and that was it. It's and hence why my company is called the Eclectic House. To take from a broad range of sources, materials, understandings. You come to it as an individual. One of the greatest arguments for a higher creator is the element of individuality. Like we're all so different, right? I'm actually a quadrupler. I have two brothers, a sister, and then there's me. There's four of us all born on the same day, yet we're all so different. Even though we've had the same upbringing, we've had the same parents, and we've had the same kind of obviously similar upbringing, and it's absolutely beautiful. Like everyone's so different, and to me that was always beautiful. Anything that is supposed to change you isn't supposed to be for you as a human. It's supposed to enhance you. Hence why religion enhances you, hence why even your own understanding of yourself enhances you and obviously gets better. um, I think desires, ultimately we all have it as people, whether it be to get married, whether it be to be happy, whether it be to have kids, whether it be to one day spend time with Imran. That's something that I'd love to do, inshallah, one day. Or even emotions, we all go through it, doesn't matter what it is. It kind of sets us all um, that plain leveling field that I was speaking about earlier. And I think it makes us really understand that, hang on a second, we have so much more in common than we do differences, but yet we allow these differences to obviously kind of take us apart, rather than understanding each other and making each other um, allow that freedom of expression, but even our own freedom of expression. And then there's knowledge, and I think knowledge is one of the most important things, because it has to only, and it can only be broken down into two things from either perspective you look at, right? Whether it be philosophical, whether it be the religious approach, or even the atheistic approach, which is there's absolute truths, like there's universal truths, but there's also opinion. And it's absolutely fine to have both, because both make sense, right? So, for example, I'll give you a very funny analogy that I like to do a lot of the time. If I ever asked anyone, oh, could you please explain to me what a banana tastes like or what an orange tastes like? You can't really explain it without saying the word itself, right? Like, meaning it's so subjective to the subject, to the individual. But the absolute truth is that bananas and oranges actually exist. But yeah, I just thought it'd be nice to start on that because we all have those three things. And I think Plato and obviously even the Aristotelian school of thought understood that there's way more concepts and topics and kind of themes that make us human rather than the choices that we make. Obviously, that's more habitual, and we'll get onto that later. Um, Let me actually move my screen here. So Islam, or I would say that the God perspective itself, right, covers all aspects of the human condition. I actually did my dissertation on the concept of where everything to an extent would fall short. So where does religion actually pick off? Like where does why is there a need to believe in a creator? Why is there a need to believe in a specific religion? Why is there a specific need for me as an individual? Why should I come to something that wants me to do certain things differently? And why should I do that differently, right? And I think one of the coolest things that obviously non-Muslim academics, non-Islamic scholars speak about, Islam is considered the only orthopraxy, which means compared to all the other quote unquote ideologies, Islam is the only ideology that actually covers all aspects of the human condition and actual civilization, right? So the social, economical, the political, and also like law governing bodies, jurisprudence, and so on. And I think that's something really, really important to understand because that's what the dissertation was about, right? And you can also find out, and you can do this yourself in your own time, hopefully, where it gets to a point where you're like, hang on a second, why doesn't this have an answer for this? Or why can't I understand A? Or why can't I understand B? So even on a deeper level of life, right? I'll just put this out there. Growing up, it was like, oh, a lot of people around me were sad, but they were telling me to do the same things that they were doing. And I'm like, well, why should I do what you're doing? And I'm sure, as you can tell, and if you can't, I was a little bit of a cheeky child, and I think it's in that our quote unquote British nature to be a little bit cheeky and tongue in cheek and just kind of question everything. Which is awesome, right? Because you grow up in that kind of culture, you enjoy it more, it enhances you. You never reject things that aren't good for you, right? You accept things that are good for you, and it's nice to be open. It's nice to be refreshing, and it's nice to be yourself, right? That's the greatest accomplishment anyone can ever have. It goes beyond religion to an extent. It goes beyond just what's right and what's wrong or the correct practice. But it needs to be understood, like, how do we come to ourselves? How do we come to being in a state of wellness, of being in a state of well-being? um, and I think I would just simply like to just put out that the whole kind of biggest difference between Western psychology and Islamic psychology is Western psychology tries to explain life without a divine creator, and Islamic psychology is about understanding life through the lens of the whole God perspective and obviously a divine creator. And the most important thing is the whole mental, physical, and spiritual. And I think one thing that is massively, massively not touched upon at all in a lot of the quote unquote Islamic works is the whole kind of ritualist or spiritualist. So you can do this right now as a little exercise. Ask yourself, are you more for ritualist, meaning do you feel the need to do more ritual acts? And even if, for those that aren't Muslim yet, right? Like in your life, right? Do you need to do habits or do you need to do certain things to feel a certain way? Meaning, what are your dependencies or what are your codependencies? Meaning, oh, the only way, for example, for me, Khalil, to be happy is to eat specific chocolate cake or to eat pizza on a Friday, right? Like, what am I dependent on for my joy, for my happiness? Because certain things are healthy and some things aren't healthy. But what's really, really important is, and obviously Aristotle spoke about, and also Nietzsche spoke about a higher level of living, a higher spiritual state, where they spoke about it's not even being about being dependent on certain things to feel good. It's about feeling good and other things just enhance it anyway. And it's a beautiful state that we can get to. From the Islamic perspective, we get told that this is a state that anyone and everyone can achieve within the faith or within just even understanding life itself, right? And those three kind of concepts ultimately make us who we are. It's our mental state, it's our physical state, and it's also our spiritual state. And they all interlink, right? They all coexist and they all exist together. Obviously, they have their own kind of different elements at play, their different roles at play. And I like to always give an example of 3 bars, which is if you are taking a lot of time to look after yourself mentally, you also need to look after yourself physically and spiritually. Because if you spend too long or if you're not moderate enough in one area, you might drop off in the other two areas. So I'll give you a perfect example. We might be this person, but we might also know someone like this, and I'm sure we do in our family or friends, right? People that spend a lot of time focusing on one area of their life, and other areas then tend to diminish over time or tends to become worse, even within the faith itself. And me and Imran have gone back and forth with this many, many, many times, where people think it's like, oh, the way to be happy is to pray something a certain amount of times, right? So a perfect example, my mum, she's more of a ritualist. She needs to be doing more ritual acts to feel good. Whereas me, I'm more of a spiritualist. I'm like, I believe in quality over quantity. I believe more in doing less but feeling more. And I say that again. I genuinely believe, for my own personal realization of the religion itself, from specific verses and hadith, which is obviously saying of the prophets and the prophet, peace be upon him, um, is that it's about doing less and feeling more rather than doing the opposite. So even those that are within the Islamic faith right now, it's not just about doing a certain amount of good deeds. When we get weighed or our scale, it's the sincere action of the deed itself, right? So we all know the story, very famous story, um, of the prostitute who gave water to a dog that was thirsty, and that was enough for God to be pleased with her. And she entered into eternal bliss and into the gardens of God, right? She wasn't a Muslim at the time. She never really understood God. She never went through this quote unquote journey to finding God, because it's what's so beautiful about this journey is you're not supposed to force it. It's supposed to be the beautiful journey. I can't believe I'm going to quote Jack Sparrow, Pirates of the Caribbean, but he says it's not the destination, it's the journey itself, right? And I'll give you a perfect example when it comes to emotions. Let's say this phone in my hand right now is symbolizes happiness. Happiness doesn't come by itself. It's made up, and it's an accumulation of other secondary emotions or secondary states. So for example, or even love itself, right? Everyone loves talking about love. So let's talk about love, right? Even love itself, right? None of those primary or great emotions come by themselves. It's always different kind of concepts and different kind of other secondary emotions that lead to it. So for me personally, love is like things like financial stability that adds to the concept of love, freedom of choice, time apart, like quality time together, like all of those things make the idea of love. And I think what's super important when you do it with emotions, for example, happiness, no one can just be happy. Our biggest problem, and when I say our, I'm talking about us as human beings, is we're either running away from an emotion or trying to run towards an emotion. But emotions are metaphysical. You can't hold on to emotions. It's a state of feeling and a state of actual being and understanding. But we'll get onto that in a little while. Okay, so God mentions the brain, and for those that aren't really from the kind of the God perspective or the Islamic perspective at the moment, I would just simply say, just put yourself there, right? So, because Imam Ghazali, and another amazing French philosopher, which we'll talk about in a bit, Rene Descartes, spoke about how there's like a mind-body dualism. So he was speaking about the importance of the mind, and the mind is literally where a lot of the framework of a human being actually begins, right? We can speak about the soul, but that's in a lot more depth and maybe in other sessions and so on. But what's really important is ultimately we all have certain lenses on. I'm not speaking about glasses or sunglasses. I'm speaking about like how we see the world, right? So how I understand it here mentally is then filtered how I see the world and through my eyes and through my lenses. Meaning, if I'm quote unquote positive and I'm happy, I'll see things happy. There's an amazing quote by I think it was Ayn Rand. She was an amazing British and English writer, and she said, "We never ever see things as they are; we see things as we are." So it's like the whole empty vessel. We're all empty vessels. We're all like empty cups. We can only ever give to people what we contain in ourselves, right? So ultimately, if I'm happy, if I'm at peace, if I'm joyful, I can offer that to others. But if I'm not happy, if I'm not at peace, if I'm not quote unquote vibes, then it means ultimately that I'm not going to really be able to offer that to other people, and it makes it very difficult because it's like it's never about other people. So he spoke about how even from now I'm going to interlink the God perspective and also the non-God perspective, which is us as individuals, where if God says to ponder, and even if you're not from the God perspective, like you have to think as a human being, that's just the way we've been programmed. We can't turn off in that way, right? It's an amazing thing. We live in a world of form and meaning. Like the meaning I give, this is a form, this is a pen, right? Like this is the form of the pen. but then the meaning I give to it then dictates its value to me. Let's take it a step further. How I see myself ultimately, beyond religion, beyond um, or within the framework of your own perspective, how you see yourself is so, so, so important. It's essential to being in a state of great wellness, great well-being. And I think that's so beautiful because you have the whole mirror analogy. Um, and there's an amazing thing that astronauts actually go through. It's called overview effect. It's when they're the first time they're ever in space and they look back on Earth and they're like, oh my God, that's where we live. And what's so beautiful is sometimes we when we start to see ourselves really in, even if it's in a bad state or a good state, you start to question, hang on, why am I like this? And it's that constant question of why. I'm gonna just quickly look at the chat because it's kind of going off a bit. Um, okay, no, that's fine. Imran, just let me know if there's anything like I need to know specifically. But we'll
Yeah,
also yeah, thanks. But we'll also do a Q&A throughout the whole thing, guys. And I don't mind staying here longer than need be, but I'll try and get it done within the hour or so. But okay, awesome. I think one thing that's also super, super important is from the God perspective, and this is gonna probably blow a lot of you away if you've never heard this before, but half of our faith or half of understanding God is actually understanding yourself and loving yourself. Right. So we love to speak about self-love. Everyone loves to speak about self-love and hashtag self-love. But one of the coolest ways or one of the greatest ways to God is actually through self-love, right? So God says, because ultimately, if I wasn't alive right now, if I didn't have the blessings of consciousness, I wouldn't really know God. I wouldn't know the greatness of life. I wouldn't know good friends. I wouldn't know great food. I wouldn't know um, sitting in the sun. I wouldn't know, which is obviously very rare in the UK, but it's kind of cool recently. So it's kind of been amazing weather. But that's all awesome stuff, right? So again, it all comes from the mind, and I think ultimately, even Imam Ghazali said that how you ultimately see God is ultimately how you can also see yourself, or you can come to God by understanding yourself and then understanding Him. But that's so beautiful because there isn't one journey to it. There genuinely isn't, right? God is the ultimate source, and we are all just the echo. But the echo is so beautiful. So I did a peace course yesterday. We're doing a Ramadan series, and I was speaking to people about rights, and I'm like, God gives us flowers, right? So our rights are our flowers. What we're allowed to do in life is our flowers. Our biggest problem is we keep giving our flowers away. We don't take enough time to smell the roses, right? We don't take enough time to smell the flowers and enjoy it for ourselves. We think existence is for others. God gave me existence. God consciously chose me to be alive today. There's not like some automated service where you just wake up, like you go sleep and then your soul just comes back to your body, or you just wake up scientifically. Like even the whole dream state thing is still the kind of untested, unkind of explored center of science and so on. And we can touch upon science if anyone wants to later on. But I think that's such a beautiful thing. And that's obviously one of the greatest arguments for God anyway, from the philosophical argument, is consciousness. Like we have the ability to think, we have the ability. And God tells us to do that, right? Not in only within the Islamic, the Quranic framework does that religious book ever say question it. Other religious books don't really allow you to question it. But Islam says, no, question it. You're allowed to question it. Allow yourself to understand it for what it needs to be understood. Because religion isn't for God. God is not a Muslim. Allah is not a Muslim. God said, I perfected your religion and I have given it to you so you can be happy and you can. God says, I gave it to you to be a form of peace and mercy and healing. But we don't understand it as that. So when we come to it, if we actually come to it with more burdens, I mean, we burden ourselves because we haven't understood the beauty of it. We haven't understood how much it actually allows us to be the individual. It allows me to be free, right? It allows me to have different roles. We all have so many different roles in life. I mean, just some of my roles. I'm my mom's son. I'm my sister's brother. I'm my brother's brother. I'm my friend's friend. Like we all have so many different roles, and I think sometimes we get too confused with all these roles, and we forget to just take time to just smell the roses, right? Like the gift was given to us for us to enjoy the gift, right? And I think that's a big part of it. And when it comes to wellness and when it comes to well-being, one thing that is universal and it covers the secular and also the religious perspective is what we digest ultimately creates and affects our thoughts, behaviors, and our feelings, which is ultimately emotions, right? So we get held accountable for whatever we listen to. We get held accountable for whatever we see. We also get held accountable for whatever we feel and how we act when we feel. And there's an amazing thinker. Obviously, a lot of people might know him, and some of you might not know him, but his name was Alan Watts. And he ultimately says that there is no such thing as wrong emotions, just a state of understanding. And for those that know the very famous Persian poet by the name of Rumi, right? He ultimately says, forget about emotions, forget about titles, right? Everything's a state of everything's a state of understanding. Now, what's so beautiful about this, and I would love to be in front of you right now, but whenever I ever give talks in front of people, I always start with this. I always say, everyone, put your hand up who wants to be happy. And everyone shoots their hands up. Some people put both arms up. I don't know why they do that, but I think it's funny, but it is. So I'll say, okay, put your hands up if you want to be happy. Everyone puts their hands up. I say, why do you want to be happy? Like I say, keep your hands up if you can explain to me why you want to be happy in the first place. Most people don't have an answer, or they struggle to figure out what I'm asking in the first place. Meaning, why should we go and try and chase things if we don't even understand the thing that we are chasing? Because even if I acquire happiness, by whose standard is it happy? Is it society standard? Is it my mom's standard? Is it God's standard, which is the ultimate objective standard? Otherwise, like Robert Schaefer said, everything's just mere opinion. And if everything's mere opinion, we wouldn't have emotions, we wouldn't have morality, we wouldn't have ethics, and so on. And I think one thing that I love from the God perspective and from the individualistic and the humanistic perspective is the ability to think critically, our reasoning faculty, our ability to learn, our ability to understand, and so on. Oh, no idea what that happened. Okay, so we live in meaning. This is super essential. It doesn't really matter which perspective at all we come from, right? Religious or non-religious. Is This is a universal principle. We live in a world of meaning, right? So I know I said earlier, obviously I did the whole banana and the orange analogy. What I think is super important is, what does it mean for you to even be you? So even this is obviously a wellness hour. How do you define wellness? Because this is a problem. What When it becomes a problem is if you live a life where you have no objective meaning, which is what Nietzsche spoke about, right? He spoke about nihilism, that there is no moral, there are no values, everything's just created by man. Um, and therefore there's no truths. If you lived a life like that, then, which ultimately someone called Thomas Aquinas, he believed that for a while, but then he came up with his own 5 ways of understanding God or explaining God in a certain way. He said no. He goes, the fact that we feel, the fact that we can distinguish very early on what is universally bad and universally good, ultimately means that there has to be a higher form of morality. Because I would be very open and very black and white here. If Imran was in front of me and I just simply hit him really hard for no reason, most of you would be like, wow, like that's not right. You shouldn't hit someone. But by whose standard is that wrong? And this is what objective and the whole Islamic perspective, and I like to call it the God perspective, ultimately gives you, which is that there's God's standard, then there's mankind and human being standard, and then you get to play within the gray area. Your life isn't being dictated by God 24/7. God expects a few things of us, and the rest of it we can do. So now to tie this massively into well-being, right? What I love about God is that God sets the foundation of goodness or happiness, but He allows us to build upon it, right? So I'll give you an example. God says in the Quran, um, whether you're male or female, but you believe and you do good deeds, and there's amazing, so many different types of good deeds that you can do, even just simply smiling at someone. God says, if you do those 4 things, God says, I will promise that person a pleasant and a happy life, right? That's the foundation. But God doesn't say specifically, okay, well, Khalil can go watch movies, he can go spend time with good friends, he can go eat food. He allows me to understand that for myself. A lot of my life is, and us as human beings, a lot of our life is to genuinely understand what makes us happy within a certain framework, right? And to also understand what doesn't make me happy, meaning happiness can't come from just being happy. Happiness also comes from knowing what doesn't make you happy and going against those things, right? So ultimately doing things that you don't feel like doing, staying away from things that make you feel immoral or wrong, and so on. um And I think what's so beautiful from the humanistic perspective is that we were all born amazing, right? So our three main states as children, and if anyone doesn't believe me, just look at a child next time, right? Not obviously like too young, because obviously they don't really move around much when they're like newborn, but our natural three states are of three things: courage, curiosity, and joy. And within that, obviously, different titles and happiness and peace and so on. But what I think is super, super important is that we've forgotten who we're supposed to be. We've created these ideas of who we think we need to be. And I think that's super dangerous, because when it comes to well-being, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to actually enjoying life, we forget to enjoy our life, our blessings. We start to we want to enjoy the life based on the standard given to us by other people. Like, what does it mean to be successful? That's my definition. God gave me the definition, but He allowed me to work upon it, because I get to prove it to myself. So I'll come back to the whole self-love element again, right? The journey to God, that those that believe in God and those that understand God and a high creator, the journey to God isn't that when you meet God, you're happy with God. The journey is that when you meet God, you're actually happy with yourself, right? And there's a part, there's a surah in the holy book, there's a chapter in the holy book that talks about that specifically, where we get told that, you know what, it's not just about making God happy. God's already happy. God is God. Like, He doesn't get sad or happy based on how we understand it, right? It's just in His own way. But it's for us to go to God and say, hey, like, I lived an amazing life. I was actually happy. I actually lived for myself. I lived for you, God. I did good things and I enjoyed it. Like, God says, whatever you do is ultimately for your soul anyway, right? So all the good that we do is for us, and all the bad that we do is against us, right? There is no need here to quote unquote bring God into everything, because then we become dull. We become very, very two-dimensional thinking. Is supposed to be third dimension. Like, what? And obviously the amazing Persian poet by the name Rumi, who said, "There's a field beyond good and bad. I shall meet you there." What he's ultimately saying is there's more to life than just the good and the bad, right? Meaning, just because something's okay for you to do doesn't mean you have to do it. And just because something's bad for you, like unhealthy for you, doesn't mean you have to stay away from it. Because there's things in life that you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice time. You have to sacrifice family. And I'm sure some of you who have come to Islam have had to sacrifice family members, time with certain people, certain actions that or habits that you were doing before. And ultimately, you know your why, you know your reason, and that's the greatest state to be in: to know your reason, to know your purpose, to know your own understanding of yourself. And I think we get too hell bent on either actions or trying to please God, like it. But one of the quickest ways to please God is to please yourself by allowing yourself to enjoy what He's allowed you to enjoy, right? Enjoy your family, enjoy your free time, enjoy movies, enjoy, if you like listen to music, enjoy music, obviously everything with moderation. If you enjoy spending time alone, which is one of the greatest gifts that all the prophets used to do, or right, is that they used to spend time alone, even though they obviously were the prophets of God. Everyone's got to spend time alone, because in that solitude, in that loneliness, do you understand, okay, am I in a good state or am I not? Everyone knows when they put their head on that pillow and they're about to go sleep at night and they have no phone in their hand, they know, we all know what state we're in. Are we happy? Are we not happy? Are we content? Are we not content? So the Islamic perspective is that God gives the whole mankind truth. And so, for example, this is from the Quran. Islam, in the Quran itself, isn't just for Muslims; it's for everyone. It's inclusive to all, and that's one of the biggest things that made me understand with absolute certainty that yes, like this book is ultimately from God. Obviously, it's got its different challenges in, and I'm sure Imran and you guys go through that in your other subjects and courses area. So I'm not going to touch too much upon that. But one thing that I think is super beautiful is that here we have a book or a guide in life, and if we don't, it's like someone giving you the answers to a test paper, and we say, you know what, I'm not going to use it. I'd rather just go over here. So when I speak to Muslims as well, I'm like, look, God gave you the gift, but if you choose something else otherwise, He's made it easy. He's given us all the truth in one place. All we have to do is just look at it, enjoy it, and then kind of manifest it. Like, we are the truth manifested, right? If none of us were alive, like right now, the truth is will just be the truth alone. We're the manifestation of truth. We're the manifestation of happiness. We're the manifestation of love, of joy, of peace. Like, it makes sense with us. We are the truth experience. We experience truth. I think it's super important to understand. And these are some nice little also quotes that we kind of got going. Let me just check the time quickly. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Right. So one does not, and so you know how I said earlier about being happy and understanding what emotions you're going through and trying to understand different type of emotions. It's never about one emotion by itself, meaning every emotion has its complete opposite, which is duality, right? So for example, the only way I understand happiness is because I've been sad in my life, or because sadness exists. Happiness and sadness both have to exist for the other one to make sense, right? So one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, meaning forget about what can I do to go be happy. Sometimes it's just about doing things that don't make you sad, right? Like that's a very, very big part of it. Or is my sadness a mental thing? Is it a physical thing? Or is it a spiritual thing? Meaning I've understood God. I haven't accepted him into my life. Or I understand what I want for me as a human being, but I don't go and do those things, whether it be career goals, whether it be spending time doing things that you enjoy, hobbies, and so on. Then the awesome one of my very favorite quotes from Thomas Watson was, to serve God, to love God, to enjoy God is the sweetest freedom in the world. But what he meant by that is to serve yourself is to serve God. And even if you're not on the perspective of the creator element yet, right? To serve yourself is to be awesome, right? To actually love yourself, to do things that are good for you. But this is the problem. Without that objective absolute standard, you're just left with mere opinions and just conflicting arguments. And it's like the parable of a daffodil. When the wind blows right, you go right. When it blows left, you go left. There's no stability. There's no set firmness in your emotions, in your joy. Um, and one thing what I love about this whole Imam Ghazali quote is that it isn't about being a ritualist. It's more about being a spiritualist. And he said, know that the happiest of people are those who are strongest in their love for Allah, right? Like to love God, to love the idea that there is this one supreme being that sees everything, it knows everything. Like, so it allows me to be more free because I don't need to go learn all the knowledge in the world. I don't need to be a perfect person because we never get told to be perfect, which is one of the things I love about our religion. He says just try be a good person, try and figure out what you want to do in life and go do it, but enjoy it. And that's spirituality. Spirituality isn't doing things that God said to do. Spirituality is to feel God in your heart when you do anything, whether it be eating, drinking, sleeping, watching a movie. Spirituality is the essence of life. It ultimately makes us us. Our soul is really who we truly are. And then awesome Fyodor, um, love him to bits, love his work. He said it is better to be unhappy and know the worst than to be happy in a fool's paradise. So what he's ultimately saying is people who chase states and one day they're happy, one day they're unhappy, that's not a good place to be because you need consistency, right? And people say, oh, but up and up, highs and lows are a part of life, 100%. But highs and lows that go like this, not crazy fluctuations where one day you're living your best life on cloud nine, and then the next day you're like bottom of the well and you're just crying and you don't know why you're sad. Like, and which is why I love the concept of understanding the emotion rather than trying to chase the emotion. If you give something its correct meaning and correct value, then you've understood it. So even if you are sad, you're not gonna really care. You're like, you know what, I'm sad, but I know why I'm sad, and ultimately that will make me happy. Okay. Um, yeah, and ultimately the way you come to truth is obviously knowledge, the correct knowledge based on your own experience truths of understanding it, seeing it through your six senses. But then the highest form of certainty or the highest form of well-being is to actually feel and have a feeling in your heart and have a feeling. So for example, I'll give you an amazing example, right? People say love, right? So my brother got married recently and I said, how did you know it was love? And I asked everyone this question and they're like, you can't really explain it, Khalil, it's just a feeling. I'm like, okay, I guess everyone says it when they're in love, right? And what I find so beautiful and why we even started the whole emotion series or why I started, because every single thing God tells us to do, and if you don't believe in the whole concept of the creator, yeah, every single thing that we as human beings do, it's ultimately for feeling. Everything we do, everything we do, whether it be sacrifice, whether it be sacrificing time, whether it be going to work, whether it be earning money, whether it be doing hobbies, whether it be spending time with family, and so on and so on and so on. Everything's based on emotions, right? We don't like feeling bad, so we don't do stuff. We want to feel good, so we do those things, right? And I think it's super important to understand that this life isn't just some base level existence. Like there's different levels to this existence, right? And the higher you go, the more your well-being increases, the more your wellness increases, the more your idea of yourself increases. And that's ultimately what you have to begin with. How much you understand of yourself, how you see yourself, and how much you're willing to actually go out of your way to understand it. I know many people. I've worked with many clients. I've been an Islamic international counselor for, it's coming up to what, nearly 8 years now. I started very young, but I started it from a very selfish approach. I'm like, well, I want to be happy. I want to stay happy, right? For me, my journey was never about being happy. I was always like, well, I'm happy, but everyone around me isn't. How do I maintain the happiness? How do I maintain joy? How do I maintain contentment? And for me, the only way to come to it was to find the absolute truth, but then to also enjoy it in its experienced way, right? Like meaning every single second doesn't have to be that you're praising God. Everything, like if you're in a spiritual state, everything that you do is ultimately praising God anyway, right? Because you're appreciative of it, you're grateful for it, you're grateful. I'm grateful for Imran. I'm grateful for all of you joining me today. All of this means so much to me because I've given it the correct meaning. I've given it what I need to give it. I've given it its correct value. If I gave it a value that was more, if I gave it a value that was less, it wouldn't sit right with me. So genuine well-being, genuine health, genuine understanding of life is an alignment of your mind and your heart and your brain, if you want to go into the physical sense rather than metaphysical sense, right? But I think that's so beautiful that you have the capacity as an individual, every single one of us, to live a better life or to live a worse life. We are our own worst enemies, Friedrich Nietzsche. And obviously Imam Ali said that as well. Um, there's an amazing argument from desire, right? And this kind of explains God a little bit more. This is from an amazing writer called C.S. Lewis. And he said the argument from desire is actually linked to emotional and mental states. So he says creatures are not born with the desire unless satisfaction for these desires exists. A baby feels hunger, well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim, well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel intimate desires, and obviously women as well. And so there is such a thing as obviously intimacy. If I find in myself a desire with, if I find within myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world, right? So what he's ultimately saying is we always have this idea of let me chase it, I'll get it. And one of the biggest problems and that creates people that and gives them mental health problems is the whole element of um destination happiness, right? And what destination happiness is when you put happiness in a place, in an object, in anything that isn't yourself. Because what you're ultimately saying is, I am now dependent on this thing to feel a certain way. That's dangerous. But what's awesome is if you have happiness within you, whatever you have on top just becomes a bonus, right? Whether it be God, whether it be family, friends. I keep saying food, probably because I'm a little bit hungry. Um, but what ultimately C.S. Lewis is saying is that because we were created, it can only mean that, and obviously we all know that death exists. Death is a thing, and that's also something that's very awesome, to a very awesome concept to understand because it gives life more meaning, right? Like, well, even if there is a quote, even if for argument's sake there is no afterlife, then surely I should still want to live this life in the best possible way I can with emotional well-being, emotional intelligence, happiness, gratefulness, and so on. But he's ultimately saying, C.S. Lewis, and obviously this is the Quranic argument as well, where don't worry about it too much, don't rush too much. There's another life that's going to last forever, but you're trying to get everything right now, right? But everything you want right now ultimately is temporary to an extent, right? So there's days where we've all been happy, and then there's days where we don't feel as happy as we once were, right? But what's more important is to understand those emotions rather than chasing those emotions, but also to understand it in an objective way. Like, okay, this is why, and this is how I can maintain it. Meaning, you're not left with mere opinions, you're left with the objective truth, you're left with the subjective truths or opinions, and then you're allowed to roam freely in the blissful garden of intersubjectivity. And intersubjectivity is basically where you as an individual comes to life, right? Islam came to um, enhance us, not change us. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure I have heard that from Imran a couple of times. So ultimately, that's it. If there is a creation, by default, there's a creator, right? If there's emotions, then by default, these emotions also have things that we can do that will allow us to get to that state, or allow us to not even to get to that state. And I think what's awesome here is the understanding of us as the individual are the most important things to us. We ourselves are the most important project, um, concept, theory that we will ever work on ever in our lives. But if we don't understand ourselves, then we don't understand life, right? Ultimately speaking. These are some nice little awesome quotes that we always kind of go through, right? So our feelings scare us, they show us and tell us who we truly are. Um, yeah, the great poet Rumi said, only we listen to our inside voice, whether it be intuition, whatever title you want to give it, intuition, gut feeling, and so on. And also consciousness. I think that's a very beautiful kind of play on words there, where you understand that it's not just yourself. You have that higher entity within you, which is your ultimately it's your soul. It's the soul that God gave you that knows right and wrong. We just have changed our ideas from it over time since we were young kids and so on, because kids really aren't born with depression or anxiety or stress, meaning what's that state, what's their state. And obviously we're told that we as adults are accountable to get back to that state as well. Our feelings are our most genuine path to knowledge. um, Also, there is a weird fake fallacy at the moment and it's kind of a Western concept, like I don't feel anything therefore I am strong. That's actually a punishment from the philosophical approach, from the humanistic approach, and also from the Islamic and the Quranic approach, because feeling is ultimately what makes you human, right? So you can't get away from your humanistic side. And again, the Alan Watts quote that I mentioned earlier, there's no wrong feelings, only wrong actions in communicating your emotions through behavior, thoughts, and feelings. And what's awesome from the Islamic approach is God explains us how to love the correct way, how to hate the correct way. Because God says that no emotions are off limits. It's what you do with your emotions that ultimately allows you to have good well-being or to have negative well-being, right? Emotions are natural. Emotions are amazing. Allow all emotions to come to you. Just understand them and then manifest it in a correct way. That's how you become happy. Truly, that's how you become joyful. And because you trust yourself, you learn to trust yourself. And this is more obviously, okay, well, what do I lean more towards? Is it emotion or is it intellect, right? Ultimately, from the Quranic perspective, Allah tells us that He's the one that makes us laugh and He's the one that makes us cry. So it's even awesome to be grateful for all emotions, all type of emotions. What really is important is how I ultimately deal with those emotions. And one of my most favorite writers ever, like honestly, and like I love him to bits. Um, his name is Charles Bukowski, and he wrote something so amazing once, right? And he said, um, he was speaking about like the whole kind of concept on emotions and stuff, and he said to hell with all emotions, right? He said all that really matters is me and how I see myself. Like, because and what I love about that is that you're not scared of depression, you're not scared of sadness, you're not scared of even being happy. Some people have that fear as well, where they've lived a life being unhappy for so long they've become comfortable in their unhappiness. And I think what's really important is that you realize that how you come to it, how you understand it first is very important, and where you understand it from, right? So ultimately, mine is from God to my head. Then I understand it, internalize it, then I can manifest my life. I can actually live in a happy, free, open, and relaxed or vibes way, um, which is super important. But it's individual to all of us. Never ever, and obviously this is the most cliche statement, never compare yourself to anyone else, because no one is you and you aren't anyone else, right? That's one of the most beautiful things of life, right? And ultimately, I'll never have the same 2 days twice. I'll never have the same day twice. Like every single day is different. Every single day is new, right? And a great philosopher by the name of Seneca said, "Live every day as a separate life," right? It's about understanding ourselves, but also understanding where we take that understanding from. Like, why do I have meaning for this pen? Right? Where did this meaning come from? Does my meaning have meaning? And does it allow me to use this pen in the correct way for it to actually be used as a pen? Because when you use something, so when I live my life the correct way, I actually have more value and I actually have more worth because of me living in that specific way. That leads to happiness, it leads to peace, it leads to understanding. And then where the intellect takes over is quite beautiful, right? Because you're not supposed to just be reactionary, you're supposed to understand it. So this is what's awesome, and I've always done this analogy, and I always tend to act it out, so I'm going to act it out anyway. Knowledge, the correct knowledge gives you a good mindset. A good mindset allows you to feel good because you've got the correct understanding. If your mind or your brain and your heart or your soul are now aligned, it'll allow you to act in a way that's in line with what you want to act with. Ultimately, meaning you have, if you have goodness here, if you have the truth here, and you have the truth in your heart and your soul, it allows you to live and experience the actual truth. And what is truth? Truth is life's beautiful. Truth is life can also be hard sometimes, but you always have the capacity to become better. You have the capacity to change your situation. One of the greatest gifts that God gave you was free will. One of the greatest gifts God gave you was the ability to change, to act, to think differently. But if we don't use these tools to be better, we'll never be better. You have to choose to be better. You have to choose to understand what's better. And again, emotions and duality, it's never about running to one emotion or running away from another emotion. It's like how pain and wisdom are in the same. And even why we feel sad sometimes, right? We feel sad because we make ourselves sad, right? We don't choose to be at peace. We choose to care about society and people's opinions, and we choose to care about culture, or what would this person say, what would that person say. There's there's different types of sadness. There's different types of emotions, and obviously we touch upon that in this slide because it links to mental health quite massively, right? Where ultimately we know what affects us. We know certain family members might affect us, some jobs that we're doing might affect us, some habits might affect us, right? Like we can't lie to ourselves. Ultimately, we can't. As awesome as we are as human beings, we ultimately, to an extent, can't really lie to ourselves. Like because God makes us feel certain things like anxiety, like depression. And if you don't believe in God, then ultimately that anxiety and depression is coming from yourself, which is red flags from your body to say, hey, stop, we need to do something. Something's wrong. So whether it be a spiritual thing, whether it's a mental thing, whether it's a physical thing, because that's healing, right? You can have any illness come to you in three stages, which is mind, body, or soul. But that also ultimately means that I can also heal myself spiritually, or I can heal myself mentally, or I can heal myself physically, like physically going and doing different actions or different habits. Spirituality is understanding life, or the essence or the spiritual concepts of life, right? And I think what's super important is to obviously a lot of the reverts that are here is the whole spirituality and mental health. Like it's such a I couldn't dare touch upon it right now because it's such a deep thing, which is why we have obviously recorded sessions of obviously other workshops that we've done. But I'll give you this little snippet here where the command of prayer came 10 years after when the Prophet was the Prophet, peace be upon him, the final messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, right? Because mindset was essential. So in those first 10 years, it was about understanding your creator. It was about understanding yourself. It was about understanding life. Because the more we understand the source of life, the more we can enjoy life for what it is. And that's spiritual, to be the ability to feel good, the ability to recognize goodness, and then also the ability to act right. But that's me done. Thank you all for listening so much. Honestly, again, it was a pleasure to be here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying for the Q&A. I wanted to just quickly point that out there. For anyone that's interested, I know we have another session on the 9th with all you awesome, amazing human beings. We also have, as part of obviously Eclectic House, we have pre-made recordings of emotion series. This was literally like what, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. In part one is 3 hours long, part two is 3 hours long, part one, two, and three are all like 3-4 hours long, but they all touch upon different emotions, anxiety, stress, happiness. What does it mean to have a clean heart? Because obviously we're not here to be perfect. So genuinely, one of the quickest ways to a happy life is actually an honest life. Like, okay, let's be honest. Let the truth set you free, and so on. But thank you for listening. I'll give it back to Imran before we do the Q&A, just in case he wants to say anything. But Jazakallah so much. And for those of you that are kind of on your journey, look, it's not about the end. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's about the end. It's about the journey itself, right? Because one thing that's so beautiful about life is there is no deadlines, right? Even if you believe in death, then that's it. You're just dead. Even if you just believe in death and nothing afterwards, then you're just dead forever still, right? So there still is no deadline. And even if those that do believe in the afterlife, it lasts forever. So stop giving yourself deadlines, or stop moving the goalposts closer or further away. Enjoy existence. That's the quickest way to understanding yourself and being happy. Enjoy your own existence, enjoy your own time, enjoy your life, be happy moving forward, be excited to move forward, be joyful, be hopeful of, oh, I can't wait for the future, I can't wait for this. But while you're doing all those things, understand that there's higher ways to live, there's better ways to live. And ultimately, we are all just creation, the same, equal. But by understanding the creator, or something that's more, that has more meaning than us, ultimately is going to allow us to be better, to feel better. And that's going to actually allow us to be able to choose better. If I don't know objective truth, if I don't come to understanding, if I don't come to certainty, I'll always be uncertain. And that's a terrible place to be in for anyone in any religion, anywhere in the world. So thank you for listening. Um, and I would love to end it on just like, obviously, many blessings, many peace, whatever you're going through. I hope it all works out well. Obviously, I am a counselor. My details are on the screen, or you could just ask Imran or Beginning UK or anything that you might specifically need from myself. But I'll hand it over back to Imran now, and before we do the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Khalil. Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair. Really interesting, and I think there just isn't much of this out there. So it's so refreshing to see that the Islamic take on something that's so fundamental to the human being. So really appreciate your time. I'm not gonna say anything more. And if people want to ask questions, please go for it, or any comments. So actually, I'll pass it back to Khalil. You decide. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna just quickly scroll up from the chat section. So what I'm gonna do is just see if there was any questions before. So this is the chat that everyone can see. Okay, so I'm gonna make life very easy for everyone. So from Kate's message at 2:20, I'm gonna be scrolling down from there, meaning if you asked a question before that, please feel free to ask it again now, so I'll be able to go through it as well, right? And I don't mind staying here a bit longer. I'm fine, I'm good. I've got till, the only place I'm needed is on my dinner table around at 8:30 or 8:20 to break my fast. I'm good to go. I'm good to stay for a while. But okay, awesome. The recording will be in a YouTube channel. Okay. My internet went off. Thank you so much. Thank you. Where can we listen to the longer ones about anxiety? So they're all on my. If you come to my Instagram and you specifically want to, I will send you all obviously the details. All the details are within my posts anyway. They're also on the Eclectic House. So what I'll do is, or what you can do is, obviously I've been tagged in the poster. So if you just go to my page and you just feel free to ask me any questions where you can find it, more information on it, I'll be more than happy to let you know where you can find them. What's the process of actually going through them? How do you acquire them? Because you have unlimited access. We don't do a limited replays. Once you have it, it's yours forever. Go through it in your own time, make notes, enjoy your snacks, whatever you need to do, you can do. So get in touch, I can get that sorted. So this is a direct message. I'm not going to read out the names of anyone, by the way. So if you send me a direct message between us, I'm just going to say it out loud so everyone else can kind of get the blessings and the understanding of it as well. Such a beautiful presentation. MashaAllah, you presented my own journey, a life community in accepting Islam 3 years ago. MashaAllah, so refreshing, and especially from a male. I get that quite a lot. And especially may your work reach many people, inshallah. Amin. Thanks so much. Can you please recommend further reading on Islamic psychology? 100%. What I'm going to do, just to make life easy for everyone, is I'm going to after today's session, I'm going to send an email with a lot of the reading that I recommend to people anyway. And what I'll do, I'll send that email to Beginnings UK or to Imran, and the awesome team there can just send it out to, because they have all your emails anyway. So just to make life easy, I'll do that. in that email, it has recommended reading, it has YouTube links, it has article links. It's got some awesome stuff. So I'll get that sorted. No worries, Angela, that's fine. This is a bit specific, but do you have any resources for people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and how it affects mental health? 100%. So I also work part-time at school where we deal with children who have autism. We deal with children that have obviously different range of disabilities and also chronic illnesses and how it affects mental health. Because ultimately everyone has it, and there's always, again, the ability from ourselves to be powerful, to either get better or to choose worse, right? Everyone's got that ability. Everyone has that ability and capacity. So I will also send those same resources in that same email. It might be a long email, but again, the longer the better for all of you, because the more resources, the more you can just figure things out and kind of enjoy the journey as well. So I'll get that sorted as well. That's fine. Thank you. When we feel low emotions of sadness, how do we process it, and how do we have to try and find ways to take us out of those low emotions? This is a very, very awesome question, right? And like the way I've always answered the same question is the same way that it needs to be understood, right? So we'll break that question down into two things. When we feel emotions of sadness, one thing that I think is very, very important, and again, I can't stress this enough, is to figure out why we are sad. The biggest problem we make as human beings is we have this emotional morality. No, this political correctness. We have emotional correctness. We're like, oh my God, sadness is a bad thing. That's because over time, the West, or we perceive sadness to be a bad thing, or to be in a low mood as a bad thing. Meaning, if I'm not quote unquote high on life, or high on spirituality, or high on just individuality, it's a bad thing. Look, downtime is fine. Sad emotions and low emotions are fine as well, as long as you understand them, right? So it's a state of understanding. Now, if you can't understand it, obviously that's why you have professionals. But before you go to professionals, and this is going to be very strange coming from a counselor, you need to sit with it yourself, meaning hold yourself accountable. Where are you mentally? Where are you spiritually? Where are you physically? Are you doing anything that has changed your state from an okay state to a not okay state? Have you done anything in that during that day specifically that might have made you more sad? Because ultimately it's not even about us making ourselves sad. Obviously we have the capacity to allow external influences to change our internal, meaning someone might say something rude to you, or someone might say it could be anything, racism, family just being rude, anything, right? That gives you a state of sadness spiritually, because you know that that is a wrong principle. You know that God doesn't like that type of behavior. So understand it first. If you can't understand it, immediately sit with yourself. Now we get on to the most important thing, which is how do we try and find ways for us to take us out from that situation? Very important. You can never fight fire with fire, right? So I'll explain that now in the emotional sense. If you are sad, you can't fight your sadness with more sadness. The way you fight sadness is by going to the opposite end of the spectrum and doing things that could potentially make you happy, right? But that's only half the battle, right? The battle is 50-50. The first half is understanding why you're sad. Because sometimes to be happy, it isn't about doing something that makes you happy. It's just about not doing the thing that made you sad in the first place, right? So that's where accountability exists. That's where objective accountability exists, where God said not to do A, B, and C. So if I'm doing A, B, and C, I have no one else to blame other than myself, because we don't want to fall into a negative mindset of victim mentality. Sorry, we don't want to fall into the whole concept of victim mentality. We don't want to fall into the concept of blameworthiness or blaming other people, right? And I think one important state when it comes to even low emotions is to forgive yourself, right? Because we do that. So from the Islamic perspective, God says he does not burden our souls beyond that we can bear. So the most logical question is, well, why do I feel overburdened sometimes? We can't blame God anymore, because what God said is true. We burden ourselves, whether it's expectations, whether it's about going about our emotions in the incorrect way, whether it's about not even understanding the emotion or even understanding the state that I'm in. And I think one of the best ways to understand how to stay away or how to maintain high emotions rather than low emotions, right, is always to never fight that emotion with the same emotion, right? So people will say, for example, oh, I'm going through depression. How do I get rid of depression? I need to go speak to someone about depression. What you choose to focus on ultimately makes you who you are. So if you're only ever focusing on your depression, you're always going to just be depressed. But if you focus on the other things in life that can take away from your depression and it lessens the burden of your depression, you're now not in a state of, like, no one is ever free from the state of sadness, depression, anxiety, because God says, I created you anxious to an extent. I created you with the capacity to be sad, meaning within me right now, my primary emotions right now, right, are happiness and joy. I feel those things very highly right now. But within me is still sadness, anxiety, and so on. So what I'm ultimately saying is, we never just in a state of one emotion. The way you regulate your emotions, the way you maintain your emotions, is to not be fearful or to not to focus too much on one specific emotion, right? Because you have the whole quote unquote pursuit of happiness, or the American dream in America or in the West. But yet we're living in a society now where progression is actually allowing more people are going through depression, more people are going through anxiety, more people are going through I'd say difficult time from a mental place, from a mental well-being perspective. So it's never about just rushing to one emotion or staying away from one emotion. It's about understanding the emotion for yourself from the ultimate source, and then living a life in a way that keeps you protected, that keeps you safe, it keeps you happy. Because it's never about God never said our ultimate journey is to be happy. That's the bell. God said our ultimate journey, right, is to actually be content in this life. And contentment obviously comes in many different stages and kind of understanding of certain areas. So I hope that gave a little bit to that question. Thank you so much. I'm autistic and disabled. It affects my path a lot. That's absolutely fine. You know what's so beautiful about that, right? Is that God is inclusive to all, meaning if your path is hard right now, there's things that God's already put in place that's going to make your journey easier. It's just about figuring out and finding out what is it that's going to make it easier. Yeah, no, definitely. Let us know. I mean, this is why we're here. Let us know how we can make it easier. Let us know what you need. Let us know kind of any area that you would like to take more help on, or even if it's just simply questioning certain things, or even if it's just physical elements or just mindset things, please let us know, because I think one of the great things that why we even do this in the first place, why we have so much peace, why we have so much understanding, why we have so much inclusivity in our faith, because it's God knows how He made us. God knows His creation more than His creation knows the creation. It's my nephew in the background. Close the door, night, please. It's a full house. Asian households tend to be. Okay, moving on. Thank you. I have to leave. Look forward to the next one. Jazakallah so much. Have a blessed day. Okay. No worries. Thank you so much. Jay, this is my first Ramadan. I told manager I converted, and she was immediately judgmental and told me please not to stop preaching to her. She made me feel so uncomfortable, and now I will not choose to share anything more with her when it comes to Islam. That's absolutely fine. You know what's awesome about Islam, right? And I think what's so beautiful about Islam is that it's yours. You have a right over it. That's your gift. God gave you that flower. You don't need to give that flower to anyone. Smell it, enjoy it. And for those that are jealous of your flower and those that want, hey, by the way, Jade, that flower looks so cool. What's that flower about? You talk to those people. You talk to the people that want to be spoken to. You talk to the people that are inquisitive, right? God bless your manager, right? But she has every right to say those things. Okay, let me be very clear here, right? Obviously, within a professional setting, she shouldn't be judgmental. If you have an issue, I would personally say take it up with management or take it higher, because that's not fair. No one's supposed to be making you feel that way. Legally in the UK, legally in most places in the world, that's not allowed. That's wrong. You have every single right to revolt. You have every single right to go against the quote unquote people that make you feel upset, because that will give you freedom. One of the greatest gifts God gave us was the freedom of expression and the way we get to express ourselves. And I think that makes it so beautiful, because we're not supposed to just be submissive Muslims. We're only submissive to God. We're not submissive to the creation, right? we're assertive, we're confident, we have self-esteem, we have self-worth, we have understanding of our own abilities and our own concepts. So, but when it comes to Islam, and it's yours alone, Jade, and I think it's beautiful for you to experience, it's beautiful for you to understand. Hold on to the flower, hold on to the flower, smell it, enjoy it, and the flower here symbolizes Islam, being a Muslim, being a human, being coming from the ethnicity and the culture that you come from. That's all of you, right? Like there's still other sides of you. You're not just um, Jade the Muslim. You have different roles that we spoke about, obviously in the presentation. You have so much more to you, right? And if someone judges you based upon a certain thing, ultimately it's their loss. You know what the gift is about, right? Ultimately it's their loss. There's an amazing quote by an amazing scholar that goes by the name of Hassan al-Basri. May Allah be pleased with all of these scholars and great thinkers. And he said, if I spoke to God about someone and they accepted Islam, then Alhamdulillah, God is still God, right? But if they rejected God, it doesn't matter. Alhamdulillah, because God is still God. Who cares what they say, right? And there was a time, and Jay, this is specifically for you, and I would love for you to remember this. There was a time where the Prophet Moses complained to God, and he said, so Musa, he complained to God, and he said, God, these people are saying bad things about me. Please make them stop. And God said, I haven't even given myself that right. Like God allows people to speak bad about him. Because ultimately it doesn't matter about opinion, it matters about your truth and your objective truth and your relationship with your Lord and your religion. There's a lot of difficulties with men in society and their mental health. There seems to be this attitude, and from speaking to people within some of the Muslim communities and sort of your head of the family, um, you have to be strong just to sort it out, or put your trust in Allah. That should be enough. Is that changing? What sort of things Islamically are there to help with that? I think mental health with men in with the gender of males is it's becoming a lot more open. So one thing we specifically do, because we know obviously it has to be combated, it has to be challenged, it has to be understood, because you're right, men being the head of the family, and I'll go on a limb here and say most of our elders in our community, realistically to an extent, needed counseling and just never got it, or needed. And I'm not going to say counseling is the most important thing in life. It really isn't, even though it's my job, right? What's the most important thing in life is that people choose to be better. They choose to be healthy. They don't choose to force their family down a certain path, down a certain route. If everyone was just open, happy, enjoying life, quote unquote hippie vibes, you wouldn't need counselors, because everyone would understand life differently. Everyone would be open. Everyone would be welcoming. There would be no judgment and so on. So it is changing, but it's not changing enough. Because even the whole concept of putting your trust in Allah, Allah said you have to tie your camel. You have to act, right? Allah specifically says, God specifically says, I will not change the condition of a person until they change themselves. God says, I'm willing to make the first step, but you show me that you're willing to make the first step. And why does God do that? Because God wants us to be proud with us. God wants us to love us. God wants us to be like, oh, I actually have the capacity to be. God wants to show us how awesome we are. But if I'm giving this awesomeness away to people, or I'm allowing myself to not be awesome because of people, then I start to dim my own light. What sort of things Islamically are there to help with that? I think the freedom of expression, the freedom to, there's 10 main rights of a human in the Quran, and one of the 10 is the right to help, the right to justice, the right to look for the correct right itself, but it's the correct it's the correct right, was a Muslim's right to understand that there's better for them. Meaning, if you keep living the same life that they're ultimately living, that's on them. That's ownership on them. They have to change that, and if they don't change it, then that's life. And I think it's important for family to be there, for support systems to be there. But I understand some people don't have those support systems, which places like Beginnings UK is awesome. Places like Organic Soul, places like even my own company, where we have people reach out individually. But what's so much more important is your own understanding of being accountable, your own understanding of, you know what, like if it's not working or something's not working, I need to change it and so on. I feel like women are front and center at the moment, and that brothers are sort of being lost and forgotten about. I know it's a big question. That's absolutely fine. That's fine. I like big questions. You're so right. You're so right. I think what's more important, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly here, Giselle, is end of the day, God says what? You're all accountable for yourself. So even if you as the women are at front and center, it's because you've chosen to be there. So awesome, kudos, clap to you, hats off to you guys, because you guys are making a difference. You're making that change to be better. Even the Prophet, peace be upon him, couldn't guide his own uncle. Allah says, you don't guide those you love. In order to be guided, you have to be sincere and you have to make an effort. But if men don't want to make the effort, then it might sound harsh and it might sound very unfair. You live with the consequences. And one of the greatest quotes by Ayn Rand, and she said, I think it was Ayn Rand, she said, everyone can ignore reality, but no one can ignore consequences of ignoring that reality. Like we all have to live within reality. And Bob Marley said it. Said to an extent, everything's poison. You just gotta pick the poisons that are more sweet. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so it's about 3:04. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me privately or feel free to get in touch with the Beginnings UK team. They can pass on the messages. I'll happily get back to them. Jazakallah for everyone that stayed for the Q&A. I want to give it back to Imran because I know I don't want to take too much time. So I'll give it back to Imran and the team, inshallah, and just take it from there.
Assalamu alaikum. Huge thank you from on behalf of everyone who attended, and some great feedback coming in, as you can see. Yeah, thank you so much. Really helpful, and it's like I keep saying, there's just not enough of this. So we're really honoured and we're really blessed to have you. And we look forward to seeing you 2 weeks today. So you'll be doing a session on pursuit of happiness, and that will be towards the end of Ramadan. So it will be hopefully a really nice end to Ramadan.
Definitely. Inshallah.
Thanks again.
Imran, I'm gonna make you the host.
Okay.
Where do I do this?
I think
more.
I think I'm already host.
Are you host?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right, awesome. Thanks for everyone for the great feedback. Imran, again, thanks to you and the team for having me on. And inshallah, looking forward to seeing you all again on the 9th, inshallah.
Take care, everyone, and I hope your second 10 days of Ramadan goes really well. And we look forward to seeing you on the next event that you want to join. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.